Good evening, everyone who's tuned in, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to acknowledge that I am presently speaking from Tecumseh Lake Secwepemc within the unceded traditional lands of the Secwepemc Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the native lands on which we are gathered across the globe. We are very grateful to be spread out over such a beautiful planet that we can call home. My name is Steve Powery, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to Dina Jobert.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm super good, and how about you?
Good. And James McDonald?
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, James.
Hi,
and
Steve.
Lauren O'Connell.
Hi.
Hello. I'll begin by thanking the three of you, first of all, as well as the musicians and production crew for a wonderful performance this evening. An actual performance to replenish our artistic souls after 6 months of neglect. And it was such a vivid reminder of how vital the arts are to really who we are as people and as a culture. So I think this sharing session is essentially a celebration of the return of an arts production to the stage. And what more powerful way to re-engage in the arts and to combine music, theater, and dance in the telling of Stravinsky's The Soldier's Tale. Or by, and Dina, you could nail me for this, by its title of origin, L'Histoire du Soldat.
L'Histoire du Soldat,
Yes?
oui. Yes.
What? Okay. So for each of you, I know the last 6 months have been very difficult. What have the past 6 months been like, and what did it mean for you to be part of this arts revival project?
Who goes
like
first? This important question.
We'll go by Hollywood Squares. Dina, you would go first.
Okay. I mean, it was super meaningful and super touching to be able to reunite with after such a long break, because I recall that my last performance was here in Kamloops in March, I guess March 8th, with Beethoven Eroica Symphony, and also wonderful works by Tel Smythe and Fatima Kisiwaran and Cheska Fortier. And like when I took the plane back to Montreal, I never expected that it would take 6 months before I could reach back my second home in Kamloops and being able to do a concert. Like that was, unprecedented times, obviously. So it was something really special to be able to be back in Sagebrush and seeing the technicians, seeing, of course, the fabulous team of James at Western Canada Theatre, working with Lauren, and seeing all different kind of arts organizations finally being able to kind of fully breathe again. Because for 6 months as a conductor, I have to say that like a conductor is nothing without musicians. This complete nonsense. So I was home, and actually I needed to go back to playing piano and clarinet because I was missing a really important part of my life. I had time to reflect on many other things at the same time, but to me it was so relevant how important music and arts in general are in our lives, and how everything gets super fragile when we are missing this in our society. So that was how I felt going back to stage, and it was for me a little bit of optimism that we could bring in Kamloops. And I'm super proud that with all the great resilience that we found here in Kamloops with different organizations, we've been actually one of the few first organizations presenting something in part of the regular season of orchestra, let's say in September, meaning that like we've been working hard in that big break so we could get started as soon as possible. So we hope this will pursue and maintain, even though that has their challenge. We are learning new process, new ways of doing production, and of course it's there's many things we are learning every day on this. But I'm feeling really privileged and grateful that we've been able as a team and with such a vibrant community in Kamloops being able to produce such a content after 6 months. That's it.
What's left, James?
Well, I'd agree with Dina. It was the same for us. When we broke, of course, with literally 1 day's notice. And we had a show just opening, which was Cafe Daughter, a beautiful show. And we had 2 shows in rehearsal. We had Chelsea Hotel, the songs of Leonard Cohen here. And then we had Boy in the Moon in Vancouver that was going to come to us. And it was just so difficult to see those shows just cut right off. And it was dark. It was dark for the first, couple of months where we didn't see a future. We didn't see what would happen. And when Dina approached me with this brilliant idea, it was just such a wonderful way. The whole concept was wonderful. The show itself was perfect for the time. And of course, I did feel somewhat flattered, and also somewhat it fed my soul personally, creatively, to be able to contribute as an actor, and also to adapt the script as well. So it really has made a huge difference. I mean, it's made a huge difference for us at Western Canada Theatre to be able to go back into the theatre, to be able to collaborate with the symphony after several years, for us personally to collaborate with Dina and with Daniel, for our team, and Ryan and everybody there, but also for me personally to be able to do something on stage. It's as artists, as Dina said, that's one of the hardest things. Is we are artists, we are creators, and we desire so strongly to be able to create, not only for ourselves, but of course for the people in the audience. And in this case, we did have a small audience to watch the performance, and we hope that many hundreds, many thousands will be able to watch it online as well. So that really is the point of what we do. And, in all this conversation about safety and about all the ways that we keep our organizations going, and we've been so thankful to the Kamloops community, both the Symphony and Western Canada Theatre, for the support that we've received from our community. And we're just so happy to be able to pay it back with the art that we are supposed to be creating. And of course, to collaborate with Lauren as well. So I'll toss it to her, which is a wonderful new collaboration.
Yeah, thanks. It was super exciting for me to be a part of this project too. For me, it was, I was kind of getting more into the choreography and a little bit of a teaching end at the beginning of COVID. And that was actually like peak competition time for the studio that I work with. So that was kind of heartbreaking to have choreographed for them and all that, and then they weren't able to perform, and then same thing with classes and all that kind of stopped, and I kind of felt that I didn't have anywhere to put that creative energy that James was kind of talking about. So yeah, when Dina reached out to me, I was so excited, so thankful to be able to get back into that. And it's super cool to see what you can bring together in, these times. And I was a little bit nervous, choreographing. I did it in my basement of my house, and then I was able to get in the studio, and then just seeing like how that translated onto the stage. And with their help, of course, they helped me so much. I learned so much through this process. But yeah, it was just super cool to see what you can pull together from all the different disciplines. And yeah, I'm so happy that I was able to share some dance on the stage again. So
for myself as an arts educator, I've some real concerns about the future and the direction of arts education. Of course, that's the roots of where we've all started. And, I think we're so passionate to be in a past where we're living and sharing our passions every day, and for each of us, that passion has probably evolved over many years, beginning in childhood. Like Lauren, I mean, I imagine you first hit the dance studio at what, 3 or 4 years of age?
Yep.
You've come a long way. But maybe just to get people to know us a little bit better, what were some of the influences or highlights of your artistic journey that brought you to where you are today as professional, arts people? If you can think of maybe a couple of things, like when you first started, or when it first hit you that arts was the path that you were going to pursue. I don't know, why don't we start with James?
I guess I give two short answers to that. One is that I was a really shy kid, and I was a bullied kid, and I went to the theater school at the Citadel in Edmonton when I was about 10 years old, because I had really bad confidence issues. And so I went to take theater classes, and it made a huge difference to me as a kid. And then when I was in university, I was a history student for 2 years. I was going to study history and then law, and then I just fell in love with the theater again.
Wow.
So I went back into the theater, and my path was, inspired by many brilliant people along the way, including the opportunity to found a company as soon as I finished theater school, which gave me the taste to not only create, but to perform and direct and produce and work with people. And it's my entire career has been founded on collaboration. And so the everything I do is all about collaboration. It's all about finding new ways to collaborate. And I was just so inspired to be able, for the first time in a relatively long career, to be inspired by a brilliant music director in Dina, who I've never done that before. I've never had the opportunity to work with a music director of a symphony before, and to see that aspect of her brilliance and her approach to the storytelling through music. Not only the music itself, but the specific storytelling through music has been so inspiring to me. So you're my latest in the series of inspiring artists.
Wow.
Wow. But I have to say that, like, for me, I also agree, James, that like each collaboration to me is so fulfilling because I'm learning from the process by being in contact with people who have such a high expertise in something. So for me, I was delighted about, so how does he look at the text, and how does he analyze things, and how is he approaching the arcs, as you were mentioning today, of the characters and everything. So this was for me super interesting and will be super inspiring for the years to come. And I felt that in my path the same way. When I've been working with hip hop artists, I learn new things. When I've been learning with, when I've been conducting for film, I've been learning new things. When I've been working actually in montage for like screening of concert, giving cues to cameras, I've been understanding a lot of process about the rhythm, the importance of the rhythm and the images and such things. So I'm someone that like I've been really lucky receiving a lot of great opportunities that put me in contact with people with rich expertise and that been willing to also share it with me. So I feel really grateful about that. So same thing. There's been many people, but I would say probably the first one were my 4 older sisters, because I have 5 sisters. So for me, I just followed the piano because it was what my sisters were doing. I was just the 5th one going onto the piano. That was just a reflex and being natural at 4 or 5 years old, starting in the piano, singing in choirs. But being from a really small town where there's no orchestra, there's no conservatory, there's almost nothing culturally in my hometown in Saint-Georges-de-Beauce. But I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna work for this to change in the years to come. So yeah, I'm just feel really lucky that when I moved to Montreal at 16, pursue my music studies, studying in piano, then in clarinet, but not feeling as a pianist, not feeling as a clarinetist. But when I finally met a conductor teacher who said, "Hey, how about conducting? I think it's suiting your personality and your skills." From that point on, I realized, oh my God, this is like what I would love to do, because this is like englobing all the instruments. But most importantly, it's about teamwork and working with different individuals. So I'm really grateful for these mentors. And the last one would be for sure Maestro Kent Nagano. That's been really inspiring for me, since I was his assistant for 3 years at the Orchestre Symphonique de Montréal. And thanks to him, I understood how a music director can work with the community, and what is our responsibility also as art organization, and how we can aim to enhance the quality of life of the community. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Lauren, how about you?
Well, I think for me, kind of as you mentioned, like the arts, dance, music has been a part of my life forever. I'm lucky to have like a family that really supports it. And I remember when I was young, I would just run around the house in my tutu, and like my dad would be playing the piano, and you know, from there I just went into dance, and then kind of the love just grew from there. I don't really remember a defining moment, because I think it's just always been a part of who I am. So I feel really lucky to have that. But certainly growing up, dancing and especially being on stage, that's my favorite part about dance, about performing, is making that connection with the audience. And I think that's what I found was special about this project, was I thought it was so like impossible to do that when you can't, gather people together in the audience. So to be able to still perform and reach people from a distance is pretty amazing. And for me, I haven't been on stage in a long time, so just getting to do that kind of reignited that fire and my love for performing and stuff. So yeah, but definitely my first times on stage and first solos were probably what kind of pushed me to pursue more dance and more training and everything. Just that feeling that's almost indescribable, but yeah, it's
indescribable in that it's terrifying yet amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
I think in listening to you, I think that probably the word that strikes me when we're talking about the arts is inspiration. And all of you talked about people who inspired you. And now we're all in roles where we're inspiring others to be involved in the arts. And Lauren, you said it's always been in you. And if you'd been young and not had that opportunity to go to dance classes, who knows whether it ever would have come out. And I look at all these young people who have it in them. And I would argue most people have it in them in some capacity. And it's up to people like us to bring that out and then in your case, James, where it became such a confidence builder for you. So often we focus on the production and the presentation, but really it's about the process and what we learn in the process and the confidence and the work ethic and the fact well, I guess we could say it failure, even though we don't like to use that word. We've all experienced where we had these high hopes for something and it just was tenuous and fell apart, but to deal with that and develop resilience for picking up and moving on is also, so you look at all those sort of those intangibles, that are part of the arts, whereas we focus on the production and how wonderful the production was. Well, you look at all the things that went into that. So anyway, turning to sorry. Yeah.
I wanted to add that I've been personally so impressed with both Lauren and James because with all the restriction of distancing, both of them have been filling many hats because Lauren then couldn't dance with somebody else. She needed to be entirely choreographing and dancing her solo and being fully engaged from beginning to end to do that. And James not only being the narrator, but also being all the characters at the same time. So, I mean, my job was the same, but for both of them, they had that extra challenge to making it, to make all these characters or all these different skills into place. So we've been doing an amazing job on this.
But you need to teach me to come in on cue, and that's probably as hard a job as there is.
You might have nightmares now about I'm receiving you from Dina.
I noticed, James, you were pretty tuned in to Jane when you knew your cue was about to come. You were looking right at her, just hoping that she would remember that you're supposed to come in. It's interesting because
it's mesmerizing to watch. And I've seen, of course, Dina many times. From as an audience member to be sitting on the stage and that's why I loved in the video being able to see your face, your expression, the work that you do, as I said, in our Q&A in our chat last night, I used to play the drums, and so that's the very small element of band that I know. And the trickiness of this one, as I said last night, is that it's written in so many different time signatures. So just when I think I've got it, because all the narrator is in 2/4, and I could go, I got 2/4, I understand what that is, but it jumps from all these different time signatures into it. And Dina was so unbelievable in not only with the whole orchestra, but also assisting me in that and figuring that out, and very patient as well. So I appreciate it.
Oh, no, but seriously, I felt that you were super easy to work with because this was a really challenging part. But thanks to your experience as a drummer, your sense of rhythm was there. So it wasn't that hard actually to work with you. So that was quite. I
just wish I knew other time signatures other than 2/4.
But now you learn a few ones now. Yeah, exactly.
Thank goodness the narrative parts were in 2/4.
Exactly.
Many things.
But I think it's interesting because the two of you have sort of almost opposite tasks in this, in that Dina has 7 people to bring together, and James, you and Lauren had people that you had to bring out. and, you know, as one person. And okay, turning to The Soldier's Tale then. It was an intriguing choice for a variety of reasons. The inclusion of the various art forms that we talked about, the unique instrumentations of the septet, the moral nature of the tale itself. But a particular interest to me were the parallels between when it was written over 100 years ago and today. You know, it was like 1918, so 102 years. And in 1918, there was this confluence of three major global changing events, like World War I, the Russian Revolution, and the outbreak of the Spanish flu pandemic. And now in 2020, we're once again facing significant global challenges. So Dina, I'm sort of curious, like, what was your thinking that went into selecting The Soldier's Tale for opening the season?
But I mean, I was expecting actually that many music directors would have jumped on the occasion to do this piece, because this is one of the most recognized piece as part of our repertoire, but also one of the really kind of weird piece because of its instrumentation. Like usually when you have chamber music, it's mostly, okay, let's have a few winds together, a few or brass ensemble or strings together. But like having this kind of eclectic instrumentation is a little bit weird. And when I look at the piece right away, when I was thinking about restructuring the whole entirety of our new season, because then I needed to reconsider so many aspects, I've been looking at Soldier's Tale, and then there was even more elements to make it happen, because Spanish flu, and then reading the story, Stravinsky was stuck in Switzerland, had not much money. He had just been at the really like climax of his career, where he had just finished composing and creating some major Russian ballet, Petrushka, Rite of Spring, Firebirds. So like massive orchestra of 80 people, and maybe you know these ballet, Lauren, that are fabulous and really complicated music, but marvelous music. And then you get from this to like an instrumentation of seven musicians, and then him wanting to do a street-like play, because now there's no money. There's the war is the Spanish flu and everything. So he thought about this weird instrumentation of one violin, one double bass, so two strings, two bass, one cornet, one trombone, two winds, one clarinet, one bassoon, one percussion. He was inspired by different kind of popular musical influence at the time, let's say, because there was ragtime as part of her play, and he tried to incorporate many different inspiration, but making it in his way. And we feel that kind of weirdness and kind of clumsiness even in the meter. And through all that music, you kind of feel, okay, this is what it is also for us to live today, with all our references are not there anymore. Everything that like would be normal, going to the grocery store, going to have a drink with a friend, is now with different ways of thinking and interacting. And when we play that music, it's the same. So something that would be stable, okay, yeah, it's a 2/4, is not written anymore in a 2/4. Is like playing with this. So there were so many elements through the play, to the story, that could be so relevant with today. Each time James was speaking about the book, or to me it was referencing about social media today and all their influence we have, and when he's saying in the text about people are even buying things that like I thought things, then they were buying it, and like that's not my problems. They are just, you know, they're it's like capitalism 200% and thing. And it's all these kind of things, topics that are kind of like, I feel really relevant today that we are looking. So I thought it was an experience to jump deeper in this story. And to me, for me, I've been studying this piece as a student in conducting, and all these elements were not as important and were not put as in relief as it is now, because of what we are living now. So that's how I feel music is so powerful, and every art form, it's that the one piece we can see it with a different angle, we can understand a new meaning, a new layer of information, brought by the performers, by adaptation, and so many things. So for me, it's been a really privilege and a real gift to be able to produce this piece in such a context. It's been fulfilling, it's been nurturing, and even more with the collaboration that went so well with James and Lauren.
Thank you. Here's a question from Yanni. it felt like I was listening to a radio show from the 1940s. Wonderful. Is this a potential new approach for local live productions in a virtual broadcast format?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll just leave it at that for now. We've had some thoughts about that. When Yanni and I are neighbors, so next time I run into him, I'll flesh it out for him. But we've had some thoughts about that it is an ideal that medium right now is obviously something that's very appealing to us. So we've got some thoughts going forward that we'll take advantage of. Unfortunately, we're a smallish community and such a good, connected community that we'll have the opportunity to work together on that with some of the media too. So,
and you look at the whole social part of the 1940s. I wasn't around for that, but the radio shows where the whole family's gathered around the radio, or neighbors coming over to, Orson Welles' War of the Worlds sort of strikes me, and how that escalated into a big mass panic, and that the world was being taken over by Martians. But and maybe it is going to be a format that we're looking at more and more, at least in the foreseeable future.
Well, and we are on social media. And I wanted to actually mention something just to add on to what Dina said about that and your question, Steve, because this is a period of history that I was always particularly interested in as a history student, because it really was the turning point into what we consider the modern world. It was the end of empire in so many different ways. But also what Stravinsky has done is not only been influenced and inspired by the Faust legend, which of course is, the Gounod and the Christopher Marlowe, Dr. Faustus, but he himself inspired, anything from, what is it, Charlie, The Devil Goes Down to Georgia, and Robert Johnson. Like, there's all sorts of legends about people trading things with the devil for talent or for money or for, the card game and the violin and everything. And it's such an interesting, I love the way that it lives on a continuity of the devil story and the devil legend in terms of trading. And it really is something that, as Dina says, it is a bit of a metaphor for runaway capitalism when it comes to our desire to indulge and our desire to need and consume. But it's also about that little moral about what it is that we want and what it is that we value. And that's something that really, is so timeless, that idea of valuing the things that we have in life instead of always looking for the things that we don't have. And that little tiny message in there he's just captured it so perfectly, not only in the text, but also in the music and the way that the music tells the story as well.
You must have looked at my list of questions. I think I showed them to you, didn't I? Because my next question was this, and look at how it was what you just said. The Soldier's Tale strikes a very moralistic tone and is full of life lessons. Are there any takeaways from the tale that could be applied in today's world individually or at a global level? If anybody wants to add to that, I think you addressed some of that right there. That rampant capitalism, that whole individualism is, I think even now it's to the point where we're cocooning, and it isn't just because of a pandemic. We were cocooning because our whole entertainment systems are in our homes now. Dine Dash, DoorDash, whatever they call that. We get our meals delivered instead of going to restaurants. We get our groceries delivered instead of going out. And there's that whole concern about the social being, and how fluent are we going to be socially if everything is done within? Anyways, what am I doing? I asked the question.
I would have something for that question, actually, Steve. Since there's one part at the end of the story where I confess that I didn't follow the dynamics recommended by Stravinsky. I have to say, as a conductor, usually, like 99.9% of the time, I'm always committed to really make sure that everything will be every dynamic articulation as much as possible in my understanding of the work will be as the composer would wish. And that really ending, as you've been hearing, is just a percussion solo for the last 25 seconds. And to me, I find that really interesting that as part of the story, we have percussion once in a while, but actually, once in a while, the double bass part is almost more percussive than the percussion itself. And And I also found out that each time there was a joyful moment or more peaceful moment or more reflective kind of prayer moment, the percussion was not there. So I had attributed for my understanding of the character of each instrument some kind of words or inspiration for each musician. And to me, the percussion was the devil or was the threat. And as we see in the arc of the story, the percussion is there and we don't really notice it, you know. And as we go, it gets more important once in a while, each time when it gets really scary. And we've been also using it that sometimes in the story, we've had fun at exploring this with James, with the text, adding a little bit of percussion here and there with the devil speaking and such. But at the end, since it was finishing with that, and it's really the devil winning, to me, it's also a reflection of right now with everything that is going on Earth right now. I felt that maybe 100 years ago with Stravinsky notation of keep it just quiet till the end, maybe at that time it was still just, yes, big problems, but that could be resolved. But now to me, it's the end. So I decided it needs to finish with a big crescendo because we are hitting the wall right now. You know, we are really so close to climate change, big problems. We are seeing it everywhere, every day. We are living through it. So I felt that with the text of James adding on the top of this and finishing with a big crescendo, so people understand that like we are all into this together. We're all on this beautiful earth, and we should take care of it. But we need to acknowledge we are in that really small time where we can maybe still change something and have an impact for the future generation. So this was the addition I thought about how today there would be a change 102 years later was for me those 20 bars making a big crescendo, finishing more dramatically, then finishing with the just really plain pianissimo till the end of the solo with no narration.
And you look at that figuratively, is that you left us on the precipice, you know, by that big crescendo at the end, and then cutting it with the crescendo hanging there. And we're sort of perched on the edge, looking over, thinking, so what do we do now? So I don't know. As a younger person, Lauren, do you know, like talking about consumerism and getting drawn into, you know, that perpetually buying things that because there's always the next best iPhone, you know, 34B, and like, do you see that pressure? That?
Oh yeah, for sure. When you kind of brought up your question, one big thing that kind of jumped out at me right away was the section in the story where James talks about how once the soldier had traded his life and he was missing, you know, like times with his family, and you know, he longed for the brunch on Sundays and the coffee and all that kind of thing. I find it's really hard nowadays to get caught up in the next best thing. And I think especially at my age, it's like, where am I going next? What do I need to accomplish to, you know, be successful or get this and that? But I think the story and even right now with COVID, with being home more with my family, I'm learning more and more to appreciate how you have to take the time to be with the ones you love and slow down a little bit, and that's okay. It's a good thing. And at the end of the day, all of those materialistic things don't really matter. So
And maybe that's the upside to this COVID quarantine, is that, you know, the family dinner was a thing of the past, and, you know, and when you did get together, the cell phones were there. You know, maybe spending the extra time with your family, and also reprioritizing some of the things that are important and not quite as important, that maybe you sold yourself to the devil and thought they were important, then find out later they're not. So, well, I'm going to stick with you for a second because I do want to talk about your dance. It was a beautifully choreographed dance performance, and it was so synchronous with what was happening in the libretto and the music. I mean, it was just, everything just flowed together. You know, what James was saying and Dina was, you know, the musicians were doing, and your dance, it just, everything. And I got to see it live, which was so cool, even though it was up in the nosebleeds. but watching you on the stage and at the same time the music and James was talking, it was just amazing. So my question is, like, what kind of things do you consider when choreographing a work that has such, like my understanding there was a tango, a waltz, a ragtime, like, and you choreographed a lot of that. Like, what do you do to accommodate sort of stylistic changes? And then the next would be, were there any particular challenges in putting this work together?
Yeah, well, that's kind of like you mentioned, there was the 3 pieces. That's what I started off going by, is thinking of it as 3 separate pieces. Normally with the performances I've done, I'm used to choreographing 3-minute long dances, and this one was 7-8 minutes long. So it was kind of 3 pieces back to back in a way. And I kind of just stuck to like musically what was happening, what was going on with the tango and the waltz and the ragtime, and also with the story, and just thinking about the princess and her role and what she was going through, being sick, with the tango kind of more mellow, intense piece, and then transitioning into the waltz, which was more romantic and joyful and about almost rediscovery, that she was able to move and be free again. And then the ragtime, which was ultimately about fun, and it was a little bit sassy and comical in some parts. And that one was really just about having fun and interacting with the audience and that kind of thing. So that was what I had thought about choreographing, but also challenge-wise, this music was very difficult to work with. Similar to what James was talking about before, it's, as a dancer, you're used to 4/4.
7/8.
Yeah, 8 counts. So thankfully I had some experience working with odd time signatures, because I'm also a trained tap dancer. So tap dance, you do a lot of odd rhythms, but this was definitely a challenge for me. And I think working with Dina really just helped me solidify hitting all those accents and hitting the notes that I was supposed to, because yeah, it was difficult, but it was also so much fun to do something so different and out of my comfort zone. So yeah.
Which is cool. I mean, that's what the arts is about too, right? It's pushing out of the comfort zone. I would say that Straczynski probably isn't the composer you want to cut your teeth on your first 8-minute dance, but it was amazing. And I at one point you were doing point. Is that at point?
Yeah.
Which looks, I tried that in my runners once. It was very painful. And then you moved into like a shuffle or something right out of that. And the contrast was just amazing. So obviously you work well out of your comfort zone, because it was just a beautiful performance.
Oh, thank you.
I was blown away by her technique. Seriously.
What's that?
I said I was blown away by her technique. And I was also super happy to see a dancer again, because I haven't worked with the Grand Ballet Canadien in Montreal for several months as well. So just being able to go to her studio, seeing her work and everything, and discussing with the dancer, to me was like, again, so much joy and so much fun. I was super impressed with everything she's been doing. And you should have seen also how intuitive she was with James' direction, because after the dances, we decided, James had the idea of, oh, no, we should have her a longer time and everything. So in rehearsal, he was, okay, how about you express this and you do this and then you walk. And she was just perfect from the first shot. She was trying something, it was working super easily. So it was fabulous to see how game she was to try things. And yeah, why not? I'm going to try this. And so we wanted her for a longer time on stage for sure, as soon as we saw her. Brilliant.
Imagine there was a lot of trial and error.
Sorry?
Lauren, there was probably a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, that was my first kind of experience actually acting. I've done acting through dancing before, but really just like working through expression in my face and my body was pretty new to me. So a lot of it felt like out of the ordinary and over the top, which which is interesting because as a dancer, you're used to, putting yourself out there, but it was just a different kind of realm. And it was so nice to have James's direction on that, because he would tell me what to think about and what kind of cues to use. Oh, and James is back now. And yeah, and ways to make it natural. So yeah, it was really great to work with him on that.
Well, I think it's the same, like as a musician, you don't truly understand music until you compose. Like, you can sit and play the notes of somebody else's composition and you can be technically highly proficient. But when you compose, you actually understand the nuances and the depth of music. But choreography would be the same. Like, I mean, you look at all the countless hours of dance classes where you all were doing the same steps at the same time, and the choreographer was telling you what to do. And all of a sudden you're in the role of creating the dance in such a complex way. I imagine that you probably learned some things about dance that you didn't even know before you started choreographing this piece, and about yourself as a dancer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. As a choreographer, I think every piece that I do, I learn so much more. And it's pretty fun to see what you can come up with. Like half the time I don't plan or expect certain kind of elements to come out that do. And that's really cool for me to see, is where I can kind of go with things. And especially this piece, I first listened to the music and I had no clue. Usually I have a picture, an idea of what I want to create, and it took a lot of listening, but I'm so glad that we were able to put work into it and come up with something cool. So
well, it was amazing. Hi James. How are you?
As Dina said last night, of course it's so 2020 to have technological glitches. So
it's interesting because
I was tempting fate by being in my basement away from the router. So
yeah. Well, your green screen behind you's changed, but your box location has changed as well. So you're number 4 now instead of 3. So you are the next question. So you had multiple characters to play while seated at a table drinking, I assume it was wine.
Of course.
Yeah, I noticed you finished the whole bottle, but by my count, it was narrator, soldier, devil, king. Were you the princess? Did she have any speaking?
At the end, the princess.
Princess, yeah. And then the bloke in the pub. So with no body gestures to draw on, what are some of the challenges and strategies for presenting so many different roles solely by voice?
Well, I like to think of it as I did an audiobook several years back for the old CBC Between the Covers series, if anybody remembers that. But it's, I always remember when you do an audiobook, your task is to embody the storytelling with characterization, but not as an actor, we create fully defined characters. But in storytelling, you are, it's a little bit of a different challenge because you are not stopping the story to become the character. The characters are part of the storytelling, if that makes any sense. So it really is about finding the arc of the story. I don't know if you talked about arc while I was in the darkness of not being.
No, it's new. It's new.
You know, so much of what we talk about in the theater is always about arc. It's always about the arc of the story, and whether that's an individual character or the story itself. As a director, of course, it's about telling the overall story and what the arc and the dynamic is between that. So that was really the first job, was to say, what is the actual story being told and what are the dynamics of the story? And then within that, it's just, you know, I had obviously some fun with the idea of the soldier being a naive, slightly arrogant, slightly selfish, but ultimately good-hearted person. And then, of course, the devil embodying the different personas, an old man, an old lady, and then, you know, when he reveals himself. So just saying, well, what is the basis of that? And then what are the different ways that he adopts himself? And of course, the just having some fun with the little characters as well. Like the soldier, there's the soldier who he meets in the bar when he crosses the border and he goes to the inn. So, the differentiation of the characters was obviously part of that, but ultimately it was just about saying, how does it all fit into the big arc of the story? And I have to say, I had a great time. I just had a ball, not only working on adapting some of the story itself, taking it from the Rameau's translation, which is a very good kind of base of the story, but it was written 100 years ago. So it's a very British, it's got a lot of British idioms in it, and it's got a little bit of a staid approach to it. And I have heard several different versions of it, and I like the ones that are a little cheekier. They have some humor in them, they have some irreverence in them, they have a little more modern. So when you bring it into a bit more modern context, and people can identify, as Lauren says, talking about having coffee, on long weekends, just so people can identify with the story a bit more. So that was a big part of it as well, just making sure that the audience could identify with it and feel like it relates to them as opposed to something that happened 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I loved your bloke in the bar. That was the cheeky one?
That was the cheeky one.
Yeah, it was the cheeky one.
Lots of it's cheeky. Doing my Richard Harris for the King was the other cheeky part of it. My daughter.
Oh, nice.
It was Dumbledore. No, somebody else said it was Dumbledore, really. So.
Oh, Dumbledore. Yeah.
That sounds like Dumbledore.
Original Dumbledore.
Dina, Stravinsky, well, we got to get a little bit of Stravinsky in here, was known for using lots of outside the boundaries, innovative musical styles in his work. I don't know if you're familiar with Orrin Howard of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. He described the music in The Soldier's Tale like this. I should get James to read it because it would have a much more dramatic effect. But the music itself has a raw, biting edge that slices away any and all vestiges of romanticism, exposing a sardonic heart that beats with constantly shifting rhythmic accents, is propelled by obsessive ostinatos, and sets up dissonances that crackle abrasively within an essentially diatonic harmonic structure. So what's your take on this rather descriptive analysis? But more importantly, what ways do you think Stravinsky's music effectively illustrated the themes and events in the tale?
But I mean, I totally agree with this description for sure. Speaking about, we already has been discussing about the oddness of rhythm, always breaking something that it seems even, and then whoops, missing 1/8 note there, missing this part, as if so we have that constantly through the work. Then about dissonance, this is quite obvious as well. So whenever, and it's also quite often used with the violin being mostly the soldier's soul, and we feel, for example, with dissonance, kind of out-tuned chord right away that he is out-tuned as a human person, as a human being. So we can feel all of these elements through the story. There are different elements that we hear that are coming in, like I said, from ragtime, but always with different kind of vocabulary of Stravinsky for sure. But the influences are there for like the jazz club as well. That kind of, sometimes it's swinging a bit, but swinging in a 5/8. So these all those kind of different amalgam of elements that makes Stravinsky. Like there's no other composer that will be like him. And actually, I read something recently where Stravinsky was saying that actually he liked to be challenged where there's a lot of restriction in a way. So maybe that's why this is one of the most creative work he has done, because choosing that instrumentation, having the restriction of only having a few musicians, knowing that they needed to be going, and they were planning to do a tour, but after the premiere they needed to stop because they couldn't do it because the Spanish flu was too important. They needed to have postponed the tour to only 2-3 years later. So all these elements we find in Stravinsky music and makes it super unique. But articulation, detail, oddness of rhythm, dissonance, all of this, we feel it through the characters. And most importantly, I feel that a little bit like other Russian composer like Prokofiev, each instrumentalist, and this is a soloist, and we feel they are a character in the story. So the clarinet to me was, for example, the soldier being a little bit naive, being youthful, being excited about life. At the same time, there's the other voice in his mind, maybe the more mature, experienced person telling him, no, you shouldn't do that, and this would be the bassoon. And then the more egoistic, I can't do this. I'm a soldier. I can't fight. I can do this. Being more the brass. There's all these elements we feel, and to me, it was like if through going through the story, which each of these instruments, it was like for us when we have our inner voice, speaking to us, we have different inner voices. Some are good, some are bad, some are coming from preconceived notions, some by society, by our parents and everything. I felt that each of these instruments were actually those voices into the story for the characters. So that's how I felt that Stravinsky's been incredibly creative. And this is why even today, this piece looks fresh and looks so audacious.
Mm-hmm. And you one of the unusual things about it is the instrumentation of the septet. But when you think about it in terms of what you said, and what you said last night about how he took sort of the alto or tenor voice and the bass voice in each family of instruments, string, woodwind, brass, and then the percussion at the back with different instruments, it actually makes sense. Like in a traditional sense, it's nonconformist. But in terms of describing or illustrating the tale, it makes absolute perfect sense because the characters can each be identified by the differences in the instruments.
And it was an inspiration he had because he had seen a little bit of eclectic group like this playing music, jazz, or pop music in the streets. So it probably nourished his inspiration about finding such an instrumentation as well. But finding the blend of such a tiny ensemble having such broad opportunities and broad possibilities was quite an achievement for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's some very challenging parts in those, and they're obviously, since you're the singular instrument and often playing by yourself, it's very exposed. Some of those clarinet, like some pretty wild clarinet stuff, and some quick trumpet licks, and
every part is super hard. Yeah. And actually for us as musicians, we've all seen excerpts. As musicians, we have orchestral excerpts we rehearse as a student because we know these are kind of like the challenges or some dance move obviously you rehearse day after day. So we have those excerpts of different pieces, and Stravinsky Soldier's Tale for these 7 instrumentalists is always on stands, or always for me as a conductor. I recall having done this for a few auditions or admission places. This is one of the common standard traumatizing almost experience because it's so hard. And it's so hard, but people could think falsely that no, it's easy music. But no, really not. It's really from the range, from everything, exploring the different characteristics of the instrument. But at the same time, like I said yesterday, when we had the discussion with James, in a way we could kind of hate that music because it's so difficult, and could have been maybe tweaked in a way that would be more natural to read or anything. But at the same time, everybody as musician has so much respect for Stravinsky that we're just going to be committed and we fully want to do our best. So the piece is well achieved. But obviously this is not the kind of piece that you finish and you're like, oh yes, this was so perfect, because there's things all the way that are surprising us at each corner. And of course, this is live performance. So live performance is about that, giving it all and being a little bit an athlete and doing it, and also as a group. So yeah, that's a really challenging piece. But every musician that were part of this were excited also to have the occasion to do it. Most importantly, because it's quite rare we have the opportunity to do it with full narration. Because there's also a suite, having just some of the main parts, but having the opportunity to do it with staging, lighting, and I mean, I was blown away coming in the stage, seeing the trees there, the lightning, and everything. This was just the la cerise sur le gâteau for us to be able to work in such an inspiring environment and working with Lauren and James on this.
Mm-hmm. It's the kind of work that. If you performed it with the same group of people night after night after night on a run, it would be different every night.
Oh yeah, for sure. And actually,
Yeah.
this would be the perfect format for such a work, because we've been working on this for really on a really hectic rhythm on a few days. But usually, James, we would have let's say 2-3 weeks in a row for such for such work, and that would have been fun for sure to do. But we never know. That might happen at one point, right?
Yeah. I went to bed scratching my head Friday night with the monologue, and I'm hoping somebody can give some clarity to it. James, you're the one to deliver the monologue. Maybe you have more insight into it, but I don't think I'm the only one. So it's the moral to the story near the end. And you said, you must not seek to add to what you have what you once had. You have no right to share what you are with what you were. No one can have it all. It is forbidden. You must choose between. Could you explain that with some bit more clarity? I don't mean moral clarity, but just with a little bit more clarity.
It's interesting because as I said before, I treated a lot of the earlier kind of storytelling with a bit of irreverence. I shouldn't say irreverence. I think it's reverence for the time. It's a different, modern, but those are fairly traditional to what Ramuz wrote 100 years ago. And, there's a few different little morals in there, which are essentially about this idea of be content with what you are and what you have. And if you are overreaching or without thought or with greed or with just constantly trying to add, if you refuse to see the contentment with what you have, you will eventually burn yourself. And that is, I think, most evident in the soldier getting the contentment with the princess, being truly content, and then saying, well, I think I need my mother as well. There's always something to be adding. And so it's just that simple moral about finding, I think today we'd call it mindfulness, which is essentially about saying, practice your mindfulness and practice your appreciation with what is around you, as opposed to constantly be saying, what can I add to what I have? Whether that's material, whether that's a happiness that is perceived, I'll be happier if I do this. It's really about that simple, and it's a lesson we can all learn, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
as I said earlier, we're forced to learn it now because we are in a position where we really do need, I'm sad. I decided today I can't see my parents for Thanksgiving in Ontario because of the circumstance. And you have to find a way that we as people, in our society, we have to take our value and appreciation for what we have around us and not regret and be frustrated by what we don't.
Mm-hmm. Good. In doing a bit of background, looking at The Soldier's Tale, it's interesting how it pops up in unexpected places. In 2018, Roger Waters, who was the founding member of Pink Floyd, he released a recording with him as voice, although I might add it paled in comparison to your performance tonight. But one of the most intriguing ones was Frank Zappa recorded a version of the Royal March. So here's just a little clip of not Frank Zappa. This is just just a few seconds just of the original of Stravinsky's. Okay, and this is what Frank Zappa did with that.
Discover a pocket. Perhaps the smoothest Cabernet you'll ever taste.
He didn't. This is not him. Anyways,
that doesn't surprise me because Bocuse Pump, some people, Bocuse Pump, Frank Zappa has wrote and composed a lot of orchestral music, super hard. I had the pleasure at one point to conduct a piece, Bocuse Pump, from him when I was assistant at Orchestre Symphonique de Montréal, and it was crazily difficult, but crazily really well written. So this is a composer and of course a fabulous artist that people are not maybe knowing his side, that he was really composing for full orchestra as well. So this is, and also he was doing a lot of pastiche inside of his orchestral music. So that's an example of his creativity for sure.
Well, and how many musicians, rock musicians, jazz musicians had classical training? You know, I mean, there were a lot of them did. I mean, that was probably in their education the only option. Well, maybe not for jazz, but anyways, I thought when I heard that, Lauren, I thought, how would you like to have choreographed that arrangement? Sounds like the soundtrack for Charlie Chaplin or the Three Stooges.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably running out of time. So I'll just maybe leave with one last question about moving forward. I think the performance tonight has given us hope that, you know, despite the challenges confronting the arts communities due to the pandemic, you know, innovation, creativity, teamwork, all highly evident in what you put together. It's going to present us with opportunities for bringing the arts back to the forefront of people's lives, and I think it's highly necessary that that happens in whatever form, whether it's digital or virtual or live. Do you have any final thoughts on what that might look like moving forward?
I mean, I have to say that, like, for me, on my wish list, it's to do another collaboration really shortly. I've been putting James to a challenge, so we'll see if he's willing to jump into this. If it's the case, there will be something again as a small collaboration, maybe shortly. We'll see. And Lauren, like I said, it was so beautiful to see her performing, and knowing we have such a talent in town, for sure. Other collaboration might be coming up. So it was, yeah, we will see how we are pursuing it through this new format. But for sure, on the Kamloops Symphony part, we have other production coming up. As you might have seen probably on the few bits of the screening, a performance that will coming up at the end of October. The Phantom of the Opera, the movie in 1924, silent movie on which composer Gabriel Thibodeau wrote a full soundtrack, on which then the KSO would be performing well with the film screening, just in time for Halloween. So this would be our next project, and of course, there's many other things that are coming up. We are doing KSO Wellness Lab as well, many activities. But most importantly for us is just to be able to share our passion of music and being able to connect with that vibrant audience and community we have here in Kamloops. That's the only thing that matters.
We have
Lauren, what do you think about the dance, you know, the dance community and
Yeah, I think it's definitely given me a lot of hope that we'll be able to bring some opportunities performance-wise to dancers in the community. Like, we've started going back to classes. It's a lot different. It's socially distanced and wearing masks, but people are still showing up and they're happy. And I think that just shows how much we need to find ways to do it. And I think this type of performance could set an example of what could be done for shows, for dance studios, for just that there's a way to perform and get it out there. So I'm excited to collaborate with my studio and see if we can come up with ways to perform and have fun, and yeah.
Great. James?
And we have some plans for the pavilion in November that we'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks, showcasing local theater artists and musicians, and some virtual plans, and as I was saying to Yanni, some multimedia plans. So we'll do that going forward. I have to admit, it's a brave new world for me, because I do believe that the essence of theater is is live. I feel like it's not just the experience that we see, it's the experience that we have gathering together in a room together, and
I totally
gathering together in a room. And it's whether it comes to music or dance or theater, the feeling of being with our neighbors and our friends and our loved ones and sharing that experience is a huge, huge part of what we do. However, there are different ways to replicate that experience or postpone that experience until we can do it. And of course, as Dina mentioned earlier, and I know, and Lauren mentioned that for all three of us, and you, Steve, as well, are part of the passion of us personally and our organizations is teaching. And we have all sorts of teaching. There's all sorts of teaching going on, as Lauren mentioned, in dance at the KSO and at WCT, that young people can participate. And ironically, and as we all try to look for a silver lining, given the fact that things like team sports are a challenge now, there's a lot of young people who maybe will turn back to the arts and find the value of arts education. And we always look at it not only as just in terms of inspiring people to be part of the arts, but in that confidence building and that communication skills, all the different things that being part of the arts can teach young people. And that's a huge part of what all of us do. And we hope that the young people in the community will take advantage of that over the next 6 months as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, what was evident tonight in both the performance and in hearing what you shared about it was passion and inspiration. And that's the fuel for moving forward, in ways that, ultimately the goal is to get back to live performance, because that is the soul of everything we do. And to hear the audience cheering and standing ovation or laughing at different points or crying at different points, really to be able to see that as artists is what gives us, appreciation. But I think that the stopgap measures that you talked about, like what happened here, are going to be what's going to sustain us through till we get to that point. So thank you very much for tonight. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched. There weren't a lot of questions, which meant you loved what they were talking about. So, good night.
Thanks to you, Steve. Thank you, Dina, especially for inspiring this beautiful project.
Yeah.
And thank you, Lauren, for your wonderful work as well.
Yeah.
And
Bye-bye.
hopefully the three of you will be collaborating again.
Oh, for
Okay,
sure.
good night.
Good night.